Hello, brothers. We're back with a new book, Vampire by Heinz Ewers, the third book in the Frank Braun trilogy. I originally bought this book to read as a solo book, not knowing it was part of a trilogy. And then to get to it, I had to go through the first two volumes. This one is translated by Fritz Saliger, the John Day Company. Copyright 1934. We're not going to read the introduction about Heinz Ewers. You can look at it yourself if you want. I've already read it with the first book. Vampire. Chapter 1, Opals. In the year in which the whole world went mad, he started out again. He always thought of it as going again, never counted how often he had been away before. This time he had stayed home for 3 years in his old home, Europe. He knew perfectly well that he was sick. Europe always made him so. After a year there, he himself could feel it. After 2 years, his friends noticed it, and after 3 years, any stranger could see it. His nerves, somehow. But he knew also what could cure him, or at least give him new strength for more years at home, to drink in deeply the torrid heat of the tropics, to breathe the solitude of the deserts, to still his longing in the cool infinity of the oceans. And he was well again, or almost well, on that day in Antofagasta. Only some little thing had remained in him, something strange, something soft and untamed. Frank Braun smiled about it as he flung out his arms and stretched himself to feel his old strength. Yes, he was well, and he wanted to dive into the water, into the middle of the sea lions, and race with them after the schools of herring in the harbor. This was the day when a streak of lightning flashed across the sky at home, and the whole world rang with a single cry that was taken up and carried over land and under water, and through the air the wild cry of the assassination at Sarajevo. In Hamburg, he had boarded the steamer that was just sailing out into the world. Lying on deck when the boat was out at sea, he felt as if he were borne by the ocean and not by the ship. The ship was only the cradle in which he lay, and it was rocked softly by the Almighty Mother. She sang for him, and when he closed his eyes, he could hear it clearly. The melody and the words. When they got to St. Paul's Reef in the middle of the ocean, he asked the captain to stop for a few hours and let him hunt for sharks. The captain refused at first, but Frank Braun conspired with the chief engineer, who promised that he would make up for the time lost. Before they reached Montevideo, so they stopped, prepared their hooks, and threw them overboard. They caught 5 sharks and ripped open their bellies in true seaman's fashion, but did not find anything. There is no abundance of human meat in the middle of the Atlantic at St. Paul's Reef. Hello, Brobs. Let me find a book to hold this one down. Come here. There we go. What do we got? Fugitive. Let me put something up here. There we go. In the Straits of Magellan, off Punta Arenas, I don't know how to say that, they met a dirty tramp steamer belonging to the La Plata government. They hailed the captain and found that he was supposed to take soundings there for his government. He was a Basque from the mountains and seemed to have only a vague idea of what soundings were, so he sailed his steamer aimlessly from one island to the other to pass the time. And when he returned to port, he got the Cosmos agent there to copy a few figures for him from a German book. For these the captain paid in skins and sent the records carefully sealed up to Buenos Aires. Not a soul read them there. They cruised in the Straits of Magellan over to Terra del Fuego, where they hunted otters and foxes, and back to Patagonia to shoot guanacos. They visited the camps of poverty-stricken gold miners and watched the freezing, swearing, half-starved prospectors turn their few hard-earned pennies into drink. They explored the country with Indians, dirty, starving creatures who went naked in spite of the cold, and who would sell their wretched lives for a mouthful of brandy. When the boat lay at anchor in a quiet bay, Frank Braun would lie on deck, securely wrapped in warm blankets, and look at the blue glaciers, and reached deep down into the sea or watched the water for seals or penguins. He amused himself tossing pieces of bacon or small fishes overboard for the petrels and boobies and albatross that rocked themselves on the water like clumsy giant ducks. He spent the long evening lying on the skins that were heaped on the floor of his cabin, smoking or playing chess with the Swedish mate. Sometimes he would reach for his old books and dream with them. He had only a few books with him: Giacomino of Verona, Frater Pacificus, Saint Bonaventura, Jacopone de Todi. The Swede looked at them contemptuously, and yet a little awed. They never rounded Cape Horn, he said once. Are you sure? Frank Braun countered. Perhaps Magellan knew Jacopone. He bought horses and rode through Patagonia with two Indians, climbed over the Andes, and descended at Caranal. There he boarded the small whaler belonging to the Norwegian whaling station and went out harpooning whales. When they had caught two, they made back for port slowly at a snail's pace in this nutshell of a boat that towed the huge whales, one on the port side and one on starboard. In Coronel, he left the boat and crossed Chile by train, then turned north through the Spanish speaking parts. From there he went back over the Andes to Bolivia, where he sang and drank with German officers who were drilling the barefooted natives into some semblance of soldiers. Now he wanted to go back. The Hapag steamer was waiting in the harbor of Antofagasta. He was strong and well, or almost well. The green water in the bay was so clear that one could see many fathoms down. Frank Braun's boat made its way through a living cloud that rolled and pushed through the water, sparkling and shining like the patina on old silver. Schools of herring, hundreds, thousands, hundreds of thousands of herring. The sea lions were chasing them and driving them into the harbor, rounding them up from the ocean in a great semicircle like trained beaters. One of the lions raised his great trunk above the water and shook his powerful head with the long whiskers, flapping his fin clumsily against the oar of the boat. Hello, Bobs. Yet, yes, that old fellow knows very well that he is free and well protected, that nobody can harm him on the west coast. He peers curiously into the boat. Who is that man who wants to leave here? Who is foolish enough to leave here, leave this blessed hunting ground of the countless herring? Fool, he thinks, fool. With a powerful stroke of his body, he lifts himself further out of the water and splashes back again, throwing himself headlong into the magnificent chase after the rich spoil. As Frank Braun looked back, he could see the endless nitrate desert, this huge arid stretch of land covering 30 degrees between the ocean and the mountains, brown and white and yellow and red. No tree, no bush, not the smallest spear of grass, no trace of green, and the city itself, Antofagasta, parched in the heat of the sun like the desert behind it, like Arequipa, like Malendo, Iquique, and all the other towns, Germans, Englishmen, Chileans, Croats, Syrians digging from the barren soil the stuff that would bring fertility to the soil in their homeland. Pale and parched were all the human beings, just like the desert in which they lived. It was like a single great sigh all along the west coast, water, and there was enough of it, of course, right in front of them, a whole huge ocean full. The sea lion cannot understand it. Hello, Brobs. Flocks of white birds were settling on the cliff all along the waterfront, and down in the water there was the chase going on, the thrilling hunt after the herring. The young sea lions and the females take the center, flanked on either side by the old ones, big, powerful brutes with long mustachios. The circle is drawn closer as they near the shallow water, driving the herring toward the piers. Nobody in the town thinks of fishing today. This is a holiday. A few yellow ragamuffin doze on the pier and glance down sleepily into the water. And the sea lions grab, catch, gulp as they dive into the silver cloud. They rear themselves and plunge back into the water, 10, 20 in unison. Between them appear small heads with clever, almost human eyes, penguins, the birds that became fish. They are jealous because they cannot grab more than one fish at a time, while the sea lions swallow them by the dozen. A giant old bull lifts himself on the boards of the pier that creak under his weight. There he sits, panting and wheezing, rocking his head, squinting at the boat. Through the rays of the glaring sun, this old fellow knows the secret. To become a fish, he thinks, that is the secret. To become a fish as we are, as the birds did, the penguins, to become a fish, oh man, back into the sea. He is certainly laughing now as he watches a clumsy pelican splash into the water, plop like a heavy ball. The pelican digs his beak into the water and lifts it out again quickly with a fish as his prize. He throws it up into the air, catches it in his beak, and flies off clumsily from the waves back to his cliff. How clumsy the sea lion muses, how plump and blundering. Just to show the pelican how to do it, he dives down from the boards with a mighty splash and comes up in a second, holding the prey between his teeth. Not a herring this time, a different kind of fish, 3 feet long. He carries the struggling prize crosswise in his mouth, throws it up into the air as the pelican did, and catches it. And he repeats this again and again like a juggler. 5, 6 seagulls join him now, flying around his head, screeching and hacking into the fish. They want their share. He bites into his fish, swallows half of it, and lets the birds have the rest, magnanimously, almost as if he were sorry for them, and back again headlong into the chase. Hello, Brops. As Frank Braun climbed up the frail gangway to board the Hapag steamer, a tall, fair-haired, blue-eyed officer came forward to meet him and shook hands with him heartily. Frank Braun recognized him at once. He had sailed with him many years ago in the South Seas. "How are you?" he asked. "Fine, since you are here," the officer answered. "You are the Ironman again." Frank Braun smiled. He had so often been the Eggman, who was what the officers called the only cabin passenger. They are always glad in the officers' mess or to have a passenger because that means better food, passenger food for all, and particularly eggs for breakfast. "I am glad to hear that," Frank Braun said. Then he noticed that there were some men and women standing on deck. "But what about these?" he asked. "Aren't they passengers?" The second officer nodded yes, but all steerage. We have a whole circus going up to Guayaquil. Then the captain appeared on deck with the steamship agent and showed them a cable that had just arrived about the assassination at Sarajevo. "There will be trouble over in Europe," he said gravely. "Vienna will never stand for that." The second officer banged his fist on the rail. "They have swallowed too much already from these dirty hog raisers. It's time the Austrians gave them a good beating." And he whistled, "Prinz Eugen der Adel Ritter." The circus people made themselves comfortable on deck and put up their small tents next to their cages. They had 3 lions and a sleek tiger, an old mangy wolf, a Syrian dancing bear, and a couple of hyenas. They had also baboons and long-tailed monkeys, an Angora cat, and a Great Dane, cockatoos and parrots, and they had horses, of course, 18 horses and a little burro. Then there were the human members of the circus. Madame la Directrice, a stout, fat, flabby woman from Toulouse, 2 brothers from Maastricht, one an animal trainer, the other a sword swallower, and juggler, 2 equestrians and 2 dancers, one of them pretty. There were clowns and stable boys, and finally there was Louison, little fair-haired 11-year-old Louison, who walked the tightrope. She was the directress's stepchild. Little Louison was soon at home on board ship. She climbed up the masts and explored the engine room with the engineers. She played with the captain and with the officers on the bridge, with the chef in the kitchen, with the carpenter down in the hold. She knew every sailor and every stoker by name, and everybody was anxious to do her favors. whatever her mother needed, and one needs a great deal on board ship. Traveling with a circus of more than 20 people and 52 animals, Louison begged from the crew, pardon. On Sunday they called at Arequipa. The clowns went ashore with the dancers and the sword swallower and gave a little show in the plaza. But in the evening there was a gala performance on board to which the captain had invited all the notables of the town. The bear danced, the clowns slapped each other, and the monkeys played soldiers. The fat directrice performed with the parrots, the dancers did their stunts, and the sword swallower swallowed 10 swords. Some of the crew liked him best, and others preferred the pretty dancer, but they all agreed that little Louison put on the best show of all. They hadn't stretched the rope across the whole length of the floor from one masthead to the other. Bengal flares were lit in the mastheads, a green one forward and a red one aft. The captain did not like to see port and starboard deprived of their sacred privileges, but he let it go for Louison's sake. His old sailor's heart warmed to Louison as he watched her scamper up the mast. There, watch her, boys, he called out to his crew. That kid can teach you a thing or two. Louison was in pink tights. She was laughing, and her hair blew in the evening breeze. The man in the masthead gave her the pole, which was decorated on both ends with large Chinese lanterns, a red and green one. She held it in the center, placed her left foot on the rope, and pawed it as a pony does the sand. Then she started out. The sailors stared at her in utter silence, completely fascinated by the young girl's skill, but suddenly the cook's mate laughed out loud, exclaiming in his broad dialect, "Look, she has the green light port and the red starboard." Nobody else laughed, and the captain gave him an angry look. The men beside him hissed him down, but little Louison had understood perfectly. She stopped in midair, swaying slightly from side to side, pursing her lips, carefully lifting the heavy bamboo pole on the right, lowering it on the left. She turned it inch by inch until the red and the green lights were in their proper places. Then she nodded a gracious little smile to the captain on his bridge. Blinking at her with his small, shrewd eyes, he mumbled into his beard, "Lute dearn, brave little dearn." But heavy beads of perspiration stood on his forehead. Without a word, without a laugh, they all stared up at her, holding their breath, craning their necks, stared at the pink boy who was dancing for them under the starry sky, under the Southern Cross. Slowly, step by step, from the green flare to the red, swaying slightly, Louison seemingly walked on air. When she arrived at the foremast, the sailor caught her and took the pole from her. Little Louison bowed to her audience, blowing them kisses and thanking them for the furious clapping from sailors' blistered fists, for the hoarse shouting from hundreds of sailors' voices. She started to go back, but the captain forbade it. "No," he declared categorically. "I'd rather go myself. I would be less scared." Then Louison went around jingling her little cup, and they all gave, even the cabin boy. All right, let's see if we can continue. Then Louison went around jingling her little cup, and they all gave. Even the cabin boy had a hidden nickel for her. But good. Can't even see the thing. All right, we'll see. Give it one more chance here, and then I'm just going to give up. The Louison went around jingling her little cup, and they all gave. Even the cabin boys had a hidden nickel for her. But the captain took her into his cabin, searched among his private possessions, and gave her a ribbon bearing the name of the ship, Thuringia. He found also a silver napkin ring with the Hapag emblem for her, and little Louison kissed him. Bye. I mean, thanks for your fucking drivel that you typed out for 10 minutes, but bye. They called at Ilo and Molendo. It was Wednesday morning when Frank Braun went up to the bridge during the second officer's watch. "When do we get to Callao?" he asked. "I must go right on to Lima." The officer laughed bitterly. "Callao? We will see Callao in 2 hours, but you won't get up to Lima today, Doctor." That was unexpected. "Why not?" Frank Braun inquired impatiently. "We will stay there for a little while, won't we? I only want to shake hands with a few friends." The second officer whistled ill-humoredly. "Oh, that isn't it. We have lots of time now. As a matter of fact, We will stay in Calais for weeks, or perhaps we won't even get into the town. He pointed to the top of the mast. There, do you see that? Frank Braun looked up and saw the yellow fever flag flying from the mast. What has happened? He wondered. Who is sick? The officer stepped closer. The captain will tell you anyway when you see him, so I guess it's no secret. I don't know who is sick now, but one man is dead. We lowered him into the ocean 3 hours ago. Who? The tall clown. What was it? The officer shrugged his shoulders. Yellow fever. In Callao, they were not allowed in the harbor, nor in Salivary, nor in Manta. In Guayaquil, they were not admitted, nor in Buenaventura. Near Cap Blanco, two of the stable boys died, and the next day they had to bury one of the equestrians. There was no physician on board, and the physicians of the harbor police were careful not to go on board the fever ship. Without mercy or pity, they were turned away from port to port. These swine, the second officer complained. But the captain said they are perfectly right. They have no equipment, and they can't have us infect their whole town. They crawled northward at a speed of 4 knots. Their hope was Panama and the Yankees, but in Panama they were not admitted either because the quarantine station was crowded. If they wanted to drop anchor outside for 6 weeks, but the American doctor advised them to go on to California. You are safe enough, he called out to them. No Englishman will want to burn his fingers with you. No Englishman. Then they heard that there was war with France, with Russia, and England. The captain laughed. Is that all? Oh no, the harbor commissioner answered. Belgium, Serbia, Montenegro, Portugal, and the Japs are coming in soon. Then the Italians, the Romanians, and Greeks. They would not believe it, but they were given newspapers, whole bundles of them. Read it yourself. Germany is done for. There will be peace by the time you get to the Golden Gate, and then Germany will be wiped off the map. The Americans offered medical help and supplies and took on only fresh water in a case. He left Panama as quickly as possible. In his cabin, they read the newspaper, Herald, Times, World, Tribune, Sun, and some local papers from the Canal Zone. Huge headlines glared into their eyes. 180,000 Germans killed storming Liege forts. Crown Prince commits suicide. Serbians beat Austrians, take 80,000 prisoners, kill 150,000. Victory of the Russians in Galicia. Austrian losses more than 400,000. Great naval battle in the North Sea. English sink 19 German battleships. The captain put down the papers and slid them over to the chief engineer, but the engineer pushed them back. No, I don't want to read anymore. What do you think, Doctor? The captain asked. Exaggerated, of course, Frank Braun commented. The captain arose angrily. Exaggerated? Lies, I tell you. Dirty lies. All newspapers swindle. The second officer appeared in the doorway. May I see the papers for a minute? The captain gave him the whole bundle. There, take them away, out of my sight. Quick. With firm steps, he went up the companionway and climbed to the bridge. Frank Braun went to his cabin and lay down on the bed. What had happened? What had changed in this last quarter hour? Was the captain suddenly different? And the engineer, and he himself too. He felt slightly drunk. He wanted to think, but he could not. He reached at random for a book, took up Jacopone de Todi, and opened it. He hummed to himself in a low voice. And I don't know these words, so I'm not even going to try to read them. He stopped. This was beautiful. Yes, surely this was beautiful. Where had he found these colors, these joyous, sparkling rainbow colors? The poor fool of Todi. But no, why sing the Speciosa now? He should be singing the Dolorosa. Do not millions of people sing the Dolorosa every single day, whereas scarcely 100 people have even read the Speciosa in all the time since it was written? The Dolorosa is the song of the people, he began. Blah, 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 blah. He jumped up from his bed. Why should he be thinking of Jacopone now, of this poor fool who had been a saint and a lunatic and a poet all in one? Why should he think of the Virgin now? Whether it was Speciosa or the Dolorosa, what difference did it make now how a poet's mood had seen her centuries ago? Poet! Ah, there was no art left, not now. There were only strong fists and bullets, grenades and torpedoes. He ran out of his room, down the companionway, across the deck, up another companionway, and until he stood on the Phocis. I don't know what the fuck that is. Leaning over the rail, he stared into the waves as they parted before the prow of the old ship. For him, the white foam of the waves once again turned into a dove singing. But the dove did not sing a song of love as of old, not a song of his bleeding heart, and it did not sing a gay song that cut through the air like the crack of a whip. The white waves were sobbing now, sobbing like the strings of a harp, while the dove sang for him. And I won't try that either. And his lips whispered, Ora, O purissima, O dulcissima, ora, pray, O sweetest blessed Virgin, pray for your elected ones, that they may return to their fatherland. Am I not one of your elected, sweet Virgin Mary, who in this age of ours has loved you as I have, who sang you songs, who wrote you fairy tales, dear Virgin, sweet, beloved Virgin, beautiful, divine Virgin, take me home to my father, to my father. He did not finish the word. The land that his eyes now beheld was Umbria, the land of saints and of sorcerers, Narni and Terni, Spoleto, Trevi and Perugia, the city of St. Francis and of Jacob, and the sweet shores of Lake Trasimeno. Was that his fatherland? Were they not at the gates of Vienna already, the people of Assisi and Todi? Had they not always been Guelphs, ancient enemies of the Ghibellines? Had they not always sworn fealty to the King of France? Was not the saint's name Francis chosen in honor of France? Did he not preach more eloquently in the language of the Parisian court, and did he not prefer it to that of Virgil and Dante? Frank Braun loved Saint Francis, who talked with the birds and who sang the beautiful song to his sister, the sun, but he loved equally well the Hohenstaufen emperor, whom Saint Francis damned to hell. Yes, he loved this Frederick II, the father of Enzio and Manfredo, who shaped the fate of the world with a blunt German fist, whose mind transcended his age, and who wrote the impudent book to the Crusaders in Palermo, De Tribus Impostoribus. Yeah, obviously I don't know that language. 3 impostors, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad. Frank Braun thought all 3 at once. Only a Swabian emperor could have disposed of them so summarily. What was his country, really? His home was Europe, that was certain. He was at home in Vienna and in Berlin and in Munich and on the Rhine. But he was no less at home in Brittany, in Provence, and in Paris, and in Italy, oh, everywhere, in Andalusia also, in Madrid, and in Stockholm, in Budapest, and Zurich, and Antwerp. In what was his country? Was he a German? He, because he happened to have been born somewhere on the Rhine, did he not know many other languages and speak them more often than the German? Then German. International? No, he had never felt that. But he had felt that above all the nations there was another, nobler and greater. The nation of culture, he had called it, and every one who could rise above the masses belonged to it. And this nation was no myth. It really existed because Frank Braun had found its citizens everywhere, all over the world. It was there, beyond a doubt, so near one could have touched it with one's hands, only yesterday. And today? Gone, disappeared as if it had never existed. There were only Germans now, Russians, Frenchmen, Englishmen, and they were all killing one another. But why? For the sake of their countries? Frank Braun laughed bitterly. This was not the way Jacopone had meant it when he wrote his plea to the Virgin. The country he had in mind was not the Todi that was just then sending 40,000 men on foot and on horse against the neighboring city of Perugia. It was not Umbria, whose counts and cities made war against each other for Guelph, for Ghibelline, and it certainly was not Italy, in which pope and emperor and king and cities and duchies were fighting one another. Italy was not even a country, only a geographical fiction, a murderous ocean in which the larger fish devoured the smaller. No, poor Jacopone's homeland was the peace and stillness of the Blessed Virgin's womb. And this other one, the Hohenstaufen Frederick, what was his fatherland? What was the fatherland of this Christian who sneered at the Jewish and Arabian prophets? As he sneered at the Christian, what was the country of this German whose court was in Let me get rid of this bad apple. Thankfully, this motherfucker's gone now. Thank you. God damn. All right, let's try this for the 40th time. And this other one, the Hohenstaufen Frederick. What was his fatherland? What was the fatherland of this Christian who sneered at the Jewish and Arabian prophets as he sneered at the Christian? What was the country of the German whose court was in Palermo, whose chancellor was a poet from Pisa, whose best friend was a Jew from Jaffa, and whose wise counselors were Saracens? No, this emperor did not believe in a fatherland any more than he believed in religion. Fatherland? This ship was Frank Braun's fatherland now. German officers and engineers, but Chinese stokers in the engine room, and the passengers, the circus people, Frenchmen, Flemings, Spaniards, Basques, Bretons, all of them closely welded together, outcasts, unclean, trembling under the whip of the yellow demon. The night before last, the riding master had died, and the hunchback stable boy. Last night, just before they reached Panama, the sword swallower died. Whom would the sea claim today? Frank Braun turned and looked down on the deck where the circus people were camped. The lion trainer was lying before one of his cages, and not far from him lay the fat directress. Little Louison crouched on the stairs, and for once the child did not play. With a grave face, she nervously fingered the beads of her rosary. Not her, not little Louison. Dearest Virgin, don't take Louison. None of the circus people died that day, but the yellow fever claimed 3 coolies and a German sailor. They called at Corinto and were sent off. At Libertad, they were chased away, as they were in Salvador and San Jose de Guatemala. 3 more of the crew died, 2 Chinese died, and 2 Spanish stable boys. The red-haired clown died, and the old dancer, and the 3rd officer died, the tall, fair-haired boy from Rostock. The Chinese refused to touch the corpses and to sew them into canvas bags, so the boatswain did it with the cook's mate. 3 days later, they were dead. On the latitude of Tehuantepec, Moses, the cabin boy, succumbed, and 2 hours later, the directress breathed her last. She had made a will in Louison's favor and had given it to the captain. If the little girl should also die, then whoever was left of their troop was to get everything, the animals, the circus tent, the wardrobe, the cases and boxes, and what little cash they had. The directress did not die easily. She yelled and screamed, fighting against death, and kept asking for a priest. On the same day, an English cruiser caught up with the Thuringia, fired 2 blind shots over their bow, and ordered them to heave to and let down their gangway. When they had stopped, the cruiser's launch came alongside, and an officer climbed aboard the German steamer. "Where is the captain?" the officer asked. The German stood right in front of him. "Here," he said. "What do you want?" "You are my prisoner," the Englishman declared. "You will come with me on board the Glasgow. I am taking command of your ship. Haul down that German flag." "Is that all?" the captain answered slowly. "You can go to hell." "What?" the officer stared. "What? You refuse to obey my orders?" "I refuse." The Englishman blew his whistle, and 6 sailors sprang up the gangway. "Arrest him," he ordered. "Don't touch me," the captain said. "You would regret it." He was so sure of himself, and he spoke so calmly and convincingly that the men hesitated. "We have yellow fever on board," he continued. 18 dead so far, crew and passengers. 2 corpses still on board. He pointed to the yellow fever flag on the mast and beckoned to his first officer. "Show this gentleman the ship's logs." "This is all rot," the Englishman exclaimed, but nevertheless he sent back to the cruiser for his physician. The first officer brought the log, but the Englishman dismissed it with a contemptuous gesture. "I can't read German. Besides, you can write anything you like in there." When the physician arrived, the German showed him the bags in which the corpses were sewn up. "Open the bags," the Englishman ordered. "Open them yourself," the captain replied. The second officer grinned when he heard this. The physician ordered the English sailors to proceed, and they expertly ripped open the seams and pulled the canvas apart with their knives. Then the Englishman bent over the horrible mass that had once been the directress. After a short glance at the horrible sight, he went back and talked to his officer in a low voice. "Do you want to see my patients?" the captain asked. "I have about 9 or more, unless some of them have died in the meantime." The physician did not answer, and the officer merely shrugged his shoulders. Finally, he turned to the captain. "I will report to my superior officer for further orders. In the meantime, you stay here. I am leaving the 6 men here as a guard." He saluted perfunctorily and turned to go down the gangway. But the German skipper stepped in his way. "One moment, sir. You had better take your men along, otherwise I will have them sewn up with my corpses and thrown overboard. And tell your captain that I am not taking orders from him. I will wait exactly 10 minutes from the time you get back on board. Do you understand? That will give you time to speak to your commander and make a report. Then I will get up steam." The Englishman swallowed a curse. He spat overboard, cleared his throat, and said as quietly as he could, "Be reasonable, man. Our guns will blow up your old barge as soon as a mouthful of smoke comes out of your smokestacks." But the captain was unperturbed. "Tell that to your grandmother. I have passengers on board, Spaniards, Belgians, Dutch, Frenchmen. Go ahead and shoot if you think that would be brave." The officer did not answer again, but beckoned to his men to follow him. It was obvious that the sailors were relieved to get off the fever ship. Then the Thuringia waited as the captain had promised, and after 10 minutes he started his engines. He stood on the bridge beside the helmsman and made him turn around and go as closely as possible by the cruiser before he pointed the ship north again. The Glasgow fired once off the bow of the Thuringia and once more. Then she fired to hit, but the shot went wild and splashed into the ocean, far away from the ship. The Thuringia answered with her flag. 3 times the German flag sent a defiant greeting to the Union Jack, but they kept on going without stopping a minute, heading slowly north at a snail's pace, and the captain cast a long, loving look at his black, white, and red flag with the iron cross. The English cruiser soon disappeared to the south. Her commander had taken the wiser course. A fever ship is like a boomerang. Someone died every day and every night. The second equestrian died, 3 stable boys and the last of the clowns. Then the second engineer, a steward, a Chinese, and 2 German sailors, and more were taken sick all the time. They called at 4 Mexican ports, but were driven away. One morning the lion trainer sent for the captain. He felt he was going to die, and he wanted the captain to look after his animals. "Don't let them starve," he begged. "Please have them fed, or kill them if there is nobody left who can or who wants to look after them." The captain promised, but the Fleming was not satisfied. "Swear it, captain," he insisted. "Please swear it to me." "Isn't it enough? I give you my word of honor," the captain protested, "as an officer of the German Navy." "Yes, yes," the man moaned. "Yes, certainly, of course, but please, captain, please swear it just the same." The captain raised his right hand. "But what shall I swear?" By our Lord," the sick man whispered. So the captain said solemnly, "I swear to you by our Lord that I will look after your lions." "And after the tiger, too," the Fleming reminded him. "Surely," the captain confirmed, "I will look after the tiger and all the other animals on board. I swear it to you. Are you satisfied?" The lion trainer sobbed. Then he grasped the captain's right hand and pressed a fervent kiss on it. The captain shrank back involuntarily, but let him have his hand. When he got back to the companionway that led to his cabin, he looked thoughtfully at his fingers and then called up to his steward, "Get my bath ready and throw that antiseptic stuff in the water." He walked up a few stairs and suddenly turned back. "Now it is all the same," he murmured. He stepped into the tent of the circus people, where he found the pretty dancer crouching on the floor. She had both her arms around the fair-haired child that was asleep in her lap. The child was pale and miserably thin, shaking with fever. "How is it?" he asked. "A little better since this morning?" The Spanish dancer shook her head without speaking. "This can't go on, senorita," the captain said sternly. "You are still well, and you must think of your own health. I will tell my steward to get a cabin ready for you tonight." The girl looked at him with her large eyes. "Yes, captain," she said slowly. "Yes, if I can take Louis-san along." "The little girl is sick," the captain grumbled, trying to make his voice harsh but not succeeding. "You are well, and therefore you must be separated from her. You will get sick too if you keep holding her in your arms all the time. You must look out for yourself." The dancer smiled. "Are you looking out for yourself, captain? Why do you come down here to see us, the only one on board this ship?" "Don't be stupid, senorita," the captain rebuked her sternly. "That is entirely different. I have my duty. Get up and come with me." But the girl did not move. "You are married, captain. You have a wife over in Germany and 5 children. You told Louison about it. You have 4 boys and a little fair-haired girl, a slim, blue-eyed girl, just like Louison. But I have nobody in this world. And I also have my duty." Nonsense, the captain scolded her. You are talking nonsense. You. He checked himself. As he saw that Louison was awake, she recognized him and stretched out her thin little arms for him. Captain, she stammered. Dear Captain. He bent down and took the little girl in his arms. He felt her pulse and patted her softly on the cheek, whispering to himself, Little dearn. Then he pulled back the tent flap and called for his steward. The steward came running to receive his orders. This young lady is moving to a cabin on the foredeck. Tell the chief steward to give her one of the cabins here in front, number 12 or number 14, and take her up to my cabin first. She is to have the bath you fixed for me. Do you understand? Yes, sir. The man clicked his heels. The captain dropped the tent flap, put the little girl softly down on the mattress, and knelt before her. When he turned around to reach for a glass, he noticed that the dancer was still in the tent. What are you doing still here? He hissed at her. Don't you see I am staying? Oh, Captain, she said, you are so good. Nonsense, the skipper barked. Go get yourself out of here, senorita. So she picked up her shawl and left the tent. In the evening, Frank Braun passed by her as she was standing in front of her cabin, looking over toward the tent. She has sapphire eyes, he thought. She stopped him. Doctor, please go over and look into the tent. The captain is in there with Louison. Tell me how she is. He nodded and went below. He heard a voice from the cages and walked over to investigate. The Fleming was standing before the cages talking to the lions who were rubbing their manes against the bars. He had pushed great chunks of meat into the cages, and now he watched them and tenderly stroked their tawny heads. Softly, very softly, came his whispered words. Farewell, Allah. Farewell, Mahmoud. The captain will look after you. He has promised me. He has sworn it. Farewell, Abdullah. Like a sing-song, he repeated the words over and over. Frank Braun walked over to the tent, put his ear against the flap, and listened. He could not hear any sound, so he quickly pulled back the flap and stepped inside. Little Louison lay on her blankets, breathing softly, her little fingers tightly clasped around her great hands. The captain sat on the floor without moving. With his right hand, he cooled the hot, feverish forehead of the child. He turned around when he heard Frank Braun come in, and his face took on an angry look at the intrusion. But before he could say anything, Frank Braun whispered quickly, Never mind, Captain, never mind, and left the tent. Louison is still alive, he told the dancer when he got back to her cabin, but in the morning she was dead. The lion trainer did not die until 2 days later, together with the last of the stable boys. Then death rested for a while, but only to strike more savagely when they got to San Francisco. There, too, they were not admitted to the quarantine island, but were assigned a place 2.5 miles outside the harbor. They were told to cast anchor and stay there for 3 weeks, 3 weeks from the last death on board their steamer. But doctors were sent out to them every day, and they were supplied with everything they needed. And it seemed as if for that very reason the yellow demon wanted to show his fangs once more. In the first night he felled 4 Chinese and 3 German sailors. 2 of the latter had sewn up the last corpses, and the third had had the bunk next to them. Now, for the first time, the crew became afraid. They put their heads together and whispered. The carpenter was their spokesman. The crew did not refuse to sew up the corpses. Oh, no. The men wanted to show the captain that they would stand by him loyally to the end, particularly in such a crisis, but they demanded that lots be cast. Whoever drew it should sew up the corpses. The captain shook his head. The man I order will sew them up, he decided. I am the captain of this boat. I alone decide, and not the lot. That was the answer he gave the carpenter. Why don't you let them have their way about it? Frank Braun asked. Now they will refuse altogether just to spite you. And then you will insist on having your own way, and it will be a nice mess. Mutiny on board, that's about all we need to finish us. Do you think so? The captain laughed. I will show you how to handle the boys from the water cant. He sent his steward for the officers and for the chief engineer. Together with them, he went below, and the 4 men carried the corpses up, depositing them on the deck one by one. Then the captain sent for canvas, 4 pieces of iron, large needles, and strong yarn. He and the second officer squatted on their haunches like tailors before one of the corpses, each on one end. The chief engineer and the first officer proceeded similarly with the next corpse. They rolled the canvas around the dead bodies, put pieces of iron into it, and sewed up the canvas silently and expertly without exchanging a single word. One by one the sailors edged closer, shifting from one foot to the other, and shamefacedly twisting their caps in their hands as they watched. Frank Braun stood in their midst and looked on at the strange scene. Without really meaning to, he suddenly found himself advancing from the group of sailors and sitting down before the repulsive corpse of a Chinese. He took up a needle. I am a goddamn fool to do this, he thought. Why am I doing it anyway? And what a mess I will make of it. In an instant, the carpenter had joined him. He took up the canvas and with three quick twists rolled up the corpse in it. Get away there, the captain called over to him. Nobody is to touch a corpse without my orders. We four here will do the sewing and nobody else. The carpenter got up and slunk away to join his comrades, but Frank Braun said, You may order your men about, Captain, but not me. I am doing what I consider right. But he thought, it is not right at all. It is unbelievably stupid. Why had he said it? This would have been such a good opportunity to get out of it decently. All right, the captain nodded. So if you like to, Doctor. So if you like to, Doctor, but pull the strings tight. It sounded like a death sentence. He continued to sew laboriously, clumsily, hating it. He took out his handkerchief and held it between his teeth to cover his nose. His Chinese stank. The others finished much sooner than he, and the second officer came over to help him. They placed the corpses in the large lifeboat, swung out the davits, and lowered it into the sea. They rowed a few 100 feet away from the ship, and there they buried their dead. They took their caps off, and the captain mumbled something that was supposed to be a prayer. It was not very solemn, but they were so used to it by now. Early the next morning, the second officer knocked at Frank Braun's door. Come out, Doctor, he called. I must show you something. They went on deck, and the officer pointed to something in the water. Look, he smiled. Do you see him floating there? That's yours. Who? Frank Braun asked. Why, you're Chinese, of course. Mine? Frank Braun spat over the rail. Why should it be mine? It must be yours, the officer explained. The iron piece with which you so thoughtfully provided them for. His last trip was not heavy enough. I forgot to warn you. So he came up again, and now he is floating around out there. What do you want to do? Frank Braun wondered. Fish him out again? Weigh him down a little better? No, the officer protested. Not I. If you should care to, he will eventually depart from the sunshine and withdraw to his fishes all by himself. Without your kind assistance, he suddenly grew serious and added, The purser is sick. Anyone else? No, no one else. Frank Braun thought, The purser had not helped them sew up the corpses, not he. He was the one who had most carefully avoided any contact with the dead or sick, and it was he whom the yellow beast had clawed now. All that day and all night Frank Braun was beset by a strange uneasiness. He could not stand it alone in his cabin with his books. Something drove him out of its confines and up on deck. There he spent most of the day and of the night, pacing to and fro, climbing up to the captain's bridge and down again. The water fascinated him, and he stared at it from wherever he happened to halt, on the bow or aft, and always the Chinese drifted by, first in the scorching sun and then in the moonlight. He is coming to get me, Frank Braun thought. The fever demon has crept into the yellow corpse. He wants to get me under his canvas shroud. Involuntarily his lips mumbled, Stabit mater dolorosa, speciosa, speciosa, he corrected himself, and yet the word that his lips kept forming was dolorosa. A picture of the crucifixion arose before his mind, and he could not dismiss it, could not escape from its relentless grip. The crucifixion of Colmar. Many times he had stood there before the terrible crucifixion of Matthias Grunwald. He never wanted to go there, but something always made him. Whenever he was in Freiburg or Strasbourg, something made him take the train to Colmar. Once he had looked at it with a beautiful woman. It is the most terrifying thing that art ever created, he had told her. You must see it. She saw it, she turned pale, then white, and finally her face assumed a sickly greenish color, like the putrefying flesh of the Messiah. She wept, vomited, then fainted. It is terrible, she whispered, frightful. He took her out into the courtyard of the cloister and made her sit down on a stone bench under the linden trees. But he himself had to go back and stare again at the dead man on the cross. Death, decay, putrefaction, and yet life. There was life in it, life triumphing even over hideousness of decaying flesh. That was the way it seemed now, and yet it was different. The waves were rocking the canvas shroud, rocking it gently up and down, up and down. Was the Chinese trying to break his bonds? The seams had been so poorly sewn, Frank Braun was sure now that he could see the Chinese through the canvas. It was swelling up, the horrid, putrefying mass was fermenting, it stank, and the water spat out this repellent corpse, a gruesome spectacle of decay and putrefaction, a rotting cadaver, and yet it had life, life, like the magnificent Christ of Colmar. Only what was there about this? What was it that made it seem different? Kung Li was grinning in the moonlight. That was it. Here was no victory, no triumph over decay, no ultimate casting off of a rotted shell of flesh. Here was not the gesture of one reaching out and up through pus and putrefaction. No prophet, no Messiah. Here was something that felt at home in this annihilation, that was satisfied and rolled like an eel in the slime of putrefaction, but something that nevertheless was stretching out its arms. Holy Virgin, he stammered, sweet Mother of God. They had lain at anchor 6 days before the Golden Gate when the purser died. The second officer had a large sheet tacked to the wall of his cabin with 21 marks on it, one for each day of the 3 weeks. Every evening at midnight he crossed one out. 6 had been crossed out already, but now he had to make 6 new ones. He was quite desperate that day. And again 2 days later when the kitchen boy died. We will never get out of here, he despaired. There are still 4 men sick, and God knows how many more will come down with it. In his off watches, he spent most of his time with the little assistant purser, whispering and making plans. The two had an idea. Just as soon as the steamer was cleared by the harbor police, they were going to drive straight to the railway station and get a train for New York. There they planned to take a Dutch or Swedish steamer across to Europe. In 6 weeks, they could be in Kiel. They calculated if they could only get to Germany. Another 5 days, and again one man died, and then the 3 quarantine weeks started all over again. The second officer sat in his cabin and wept like a child. We will never get out of here, never. But the assistant purser was more resourceful. He did not say much, but he went about mysteriously before each visit of the harbor physician. He now had the duties of the purser, and it was his job to go down the gangway and talk to the men. Late one night there was a knock on Frank Braun's door, and the second officer with the little assistant came in on tiptoes. Psst, they said, don't make any noise. They closed the door carefully behind them like 2 conspirators. We have found a way to clear out of here, the purser whispered. I bribed the sailor from the physician's launch. He is coming for us tomorrow with a boat. Fine, Frank Braun said. But, the second officer spoke up, you have to help us. You see, we don't want to just clear out like deserters. You must talk to the captain. If you talk to him, he will let us go. Frank Braun was doubtful. Do you think so? He will get into trouble when the authorities find out. But they won't find out. They can't. They have not asked for our ship's list yet, so they don't know who is on board and who isn't. Just talk to the captain. He can't refuse you. And if he lets you go, he must let us go, too. All right, Frank Braun acceded. I will try. He went to see the captain and pretended that the whole idea was his own and that the other 2 had only joined him. The captain was not very amenable to the plan. Why was he in such a hurry? He would get there soon enough. What difference did it make whether he was killed in October or December? That seemed so true, and Frank Braun did not know what to answer. Did he really want to go to Germany at all? But in any case, he felt certain of one thing. He wanted to quit the ship. If only he had a little enthusiasm, a little love for his country, if he could feel only a little, as those others 2 did. But there was nothing in him, nothing at all. He could think only. The captain is perfectly right. It is always soon enough to get one's self killed. At last he thought of something. Captain, he said, if you had a chance to sail for Germany today, would you wait until tomorrow? The captain looked at him firmly. No, sir, not I. I certainly would not. Well, Frank Braun shrugged his shoulders. So the captain grumblingly gave him permission to go. As soon as the moon had gone down, the boat cast off. They rowed across the harbor without being stopped. A taxicab was waiting at the pier to take them to the station, but there they had hours to wait for their train. When at last their train rolled out of San Francisco, the second officer exclaimed, now we are free at last. And the purser rejoiced. To Germany. Hurrah for our emperor. Frank Braun was silent. And there's the end of that first long-ass chapter. All right, Bubs, that's all for now.